Let's take a look at how effects work inside of Adobe Premiere Pro. If you're following along, you can continue working in the actual sequence that you've been following along with all of these exercises since the hands-on part of this course in Chapter 2. And if you're just tuning in, you can open up your Intro to 360 Mettle Chapter 2_5 on project. And in there, there's a Chapter 3-4 sequence, which is where we left off in the last exercise. You can see actually some transitions that I've added from Mettle onto these clips, everywhere from the light leaks to the Mobius zoom. And if you look further in the timeline, there's actually a light raise effect. You can select those transitions and they're going to come up in the effect controls. You can simply press Shift 5 to bring those effect controls up and see some of the parameters that I manipulated. And if you're looking for more information, just check out the movie previously or head to mettle.com and see some of the tutorials specifically on each one of the transitions in both Pack 1 and 2. But now let's move on to some effects. So effects in Premiere Pro work in a couple different ways. Number one, if I select any clip, I'm going to select the last clip in the timeline. There are a certain amount of fixed effects that come on a clip. Those effects involve the position of a clip. So here you can see here, if I wanted to scale down or reposition the clip for any reason, I could do that directly within here. There are opacity fixed effects if I wanted to change the opacity of a clip. And then there's time remapping effects. So if I wanted to speed up or slow down the speed of a clip. Over here in the effects tab, and the reason it's over here to the right is because I've moved to my effects workspace. So I selected that ahead of time. The effects tab is going to be here to the right. I've got applied effects. And what is involved here is I can go to a particular category under video effects, such as color correction. And if I look inside, there's a ton of different effects. In fact, there's one here, a lumetri color effect. What I'm going to do is just apply that to the last clip here in the timeline. When the effect is applied, if I have my clip selected, I could then play around with that effect's parameters here inside the effect controls. So one thing that you should know is that this is the ultimate color correction effect inside of Adobe Premiere Pro, meant to work with flat footage. However, there are a couple cool things that you can do, such as basic corrections to your clip. One of my favorites here is if you open up the Creative tab, you can go to a look category and kind of add like an Instagram type look. So there's things such as blue ice, giving your footage just a little bit of a tint, as you can see here. Okay. Blue steel look. Can't go wrong with that. And wanted to show you that once I apply this effect, of course, I can click on this effects badge to turn that effect on and off. If I wanted to, by the way, I can select this effect and choose to delete it from the clip. Even better, I could select a series of clips here in the timeline. I kind of clicked and dragged a marquee around these 3 clips. And in the color correction category still, I'm going to select the tint effect. And if I drag it here in the timeline, just notice that there is a bounding box surrounding all 3 of them. Once I release my mouse and then move my playhead over those clips, notice that the black and white or tint effect was applied to all 3 of these simultaneously. If we just take a look at one of these clips, I'm going to select it, where we can see that tint effect. All effects contain your ability to mask them or limit the effect to a certain part of the screen. So that is something that you could do, and there's a ton of tutorials online of how to do that. On top of your ability to mask this, or once you start to mask it, you can track it here in the scene. Here we're going to start talking about some limitations. These effects really assume that this footage is flat. It doesn't know that it's 360. Premiere Pro knows that it's 360, but these effects and transitions do not. So there are going to potentially be some problems if you try to track your effect, your masked effect, if you're just going to use Premiere Pro's built-in technology. I'm just going to take these effects that I just applied to those clips and just press Control-Z to undo and remove them from a clip. Now, another thing that's really just handy to know about effects is that all of your effects can actually be keyframed. So we're going to cover that a little bit later. And the other thing is that we can apply effects to something called adjustment layers. So here I'm in my project panel. It's just over here on the bottom left-hand corner. I want to draw your attention to this new item badge. And if I click on it, I can create an adjustment layer. And this adjustment layer's width and height is going to match the size of my currently selected sequence, the Chapter 3_4, which happens to be the 30 frames per second, 4K base. And if I press OK, the adjustment layer is then created inside of the project panel. I could just take that adjustment layer, drag it onto my V2 track, and I'm going to just stretch this out. Now, I want you to note that I am using the overwrite trim tool in order to extend it. I'll extend it to be the length of the clips that are above it. Now, the cool thing about adjustment layers, if you've ever been or used Photoshop, you'll get familiar. The adjustment layer is going to affect all the clips underneath. So I can now just apply the tint, and all of my clips right here in my timeline are in fact black and white. The other cool thing about adjustment layers is that you could do things such as blending. So with this effect applied, I could go over to my opacity settings and actually kind of choose a blend mode, such as multiply, to give this clip a look. And just to show you, if I turn this tint on and off, the kind of look that it gives that clip. Adjustment layers in Premiere Pro are also adjustable in length. So if I only want, let's say, half of my sequence here to be affected by the adjustment layer, I can just trim the adjustment layer. And I use that overwrite trim tool. Just keep in mind the red arrow. You can see here that it's affecting all the clips that are underneath the adjustment layer, but the clips that don't have the adjustment layer aren't affected. Now, the key to keyframing any of these effects are these stopwatches here. And we're going to see this using one of Mettle's effects in an upcoming movie. Now, let's cover in the next movie all about the limitations of these effects in our 360 VR workflow.